The glass shattered as bullets flew across the restaurant, their eyes meeting for the first time between chaos and gunfire. Neither the ruthless mafia boss nor the shy waitress could have known that a simple translation would ignite a passion that would threaten everything they held dear. Is your heart racing already? Drop a comment telling us where you're watching this dangerous love story from and hit subscribe for more forbidden romances that will leave you breathless. The restaurant erupted in chaos as glass shattered across the marble floor. A rival family had entered Antonio Ricci's favorite establishment, and within seconds, gunfire replaced the soft classical music. Antonio, 34, head of the Ricci crime family, remained eerily calm as his bodyguards formed a protective circle around him. Blood trickled down his temple from a shard of glass, but his eyes weren't on his attackers. They were fixed on her. The waitress, petite with chestnut hair falling from her once neat bun, had dropped to the floor behind an overturned table. While others screamed, she remained silent, calculating. There was something in her eyes. Not just fear, intelligence, awareness. Everyone who doesn't want to die. Get out. Antonio's consigliere bellowed as the shooting paused. The restaurant cleared in seconds, but Antonio noticed the waitress didn't run. Instead, she crawled toward an elderly couple frozen in terror, guiding them toward the kitchen exit. Interesting, Antonio muttered, watching her risk her life for strangers while his men eliminated the last of the attackers. 20 minutes later, as police sirens wailed in the distance, Antonio sat calmly at the only intact table. Bodies were being discreetly removed through the back. The restaurant owner, Paolo, trembled before him. My sincerest apologies, Mr. Ricci. I had no idea the Castellanos would— 3 of my men are dead, Antonio interrupted, voice soft but deadly. Someone tipped them off about my dinner here. I would never— I know, Antonio smiled coldly. Because if you did, you wouldn't be breathing. Now where's that waitress? The one with the quick thinking. Paolo's eyes widened. Lucy? She's just a waitress, Mr. Ricci. Started a few months ago. Hard-working girl, supports her mother. Bring her. 2 minutes later, Lucy stood before him, her uniform stained with wine and speckled with blood. Up close, Antonio noticed her eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, defiant despite her trembling hands. You speak Italian? Antonio asked abruptly. No, she answered, her voice steadier than expected. Antonio switched to rapid Italian, addressing his right-hand man, Marco. Tell everyone I'll give them my salary and position if they can translate what I'm saying right now. He laughed darkly, knowing none of the remaining staff would understand. Lucy cleared her throat. You're offering your salary and position to anyone who can translate what you just said, she replied in perfect English. The room fell silent. Antonio's laughter died as his eyes narrowed dangerously. You lied, he said softly, rising from his chair. His men tensed, hands moving to weapons. No, Lucy met his gaze. You asked if I speak Italian. I don't. I speak Sicilian. My grandmother was from Palermo. For the first time in years, Antonio Ricci was speechless. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but interest. He circled her slowly like a predator, but Lucy didn't cower. Do you know who I am? He asked. Yes, she answered simply. And you're not afraid to look me in the eyes? Knowing what I could do? Lucy's pulse raced, but her voice remained steady. My nonna taught me that when death comes, meet it standing. Antonio's lips curved into an unexpected smile. I'm not death tonight, Lucy, but I could be opportunity. Behind them, Marco cleared his throat. Boss, we need to leave. Police. Antonio never broke eye contact with Lucy. You're coming with us. I have a mother who depends on me, she countered, surprising everyone with her audacity. And she'll receive 10 times your monthly salary tomorrow, Antonio replied smoothly. Consider it a signing bonus. Lucy felt cold dread pool in her stomach. For what job? Antonio's smile widened. My new translator, of course. As his men surrounded her, Lucy realized with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. And the terrifying part wasn't being taken by the city's most notorious mafia boss. It was the inexplicable flutter in her chest when he smiled. 3 days later, Lucy sat in Antonio's study, surrounded by leather-bound books and the scent of expensive cologne. The Ricci mansion sprawled across 10 acres of heavily guarded property outside the city. Her translator position had quickly revealed itself as something more complex. Antonio wanted someone who could understand Sicilian dialects during business meetings, but appeared innocuous. A secret weapon disguised as an assistant. "These are shipping manifests," Lucy said, scanning the documents Antonio had placed before her. "From Sicily to Boston Harbor, but the contents..." She hesitated. "Say it," Antonio commanded, watching her intently from across his mahogany desk. "Weapons, military grade." Lucy looked up, meeting his dark gaze. "This is illegal." Antonio laughed, the sound rich and dangerous. "Everything I do is illegal, Kara. The question is whether you'll continue translating or if I need to find someone else." The threat hung unspoken between them. Lucy thought of her mother, whose medical bills were now mysteriously taken care of the envelope of cash delivered to their modest apartment, of the men who now watched their home, for protection or surveillance she wasn't sure. "I'll translate," she said quietly, "but I won't carry guns or hurt anyone." Something like respect flickered in Antonio's eyes. "Fair enough." A knock interrupted them. Marco entered, his expression grim. "The Castellanos have requested a meeting." Neutral ground. Antonio's jaw tightened. "After they ambushed me?" Bold. "They're claiming it wasn't them, that someone used their name to create conflict." Lucy watched Antonio's face shift from anger to calculation. His eyes briefly met hers before returning to Marco. "Set it up. Tomorrow. The old warehouse." He paused. "And she comes with us." Marco's eyebrows rose. "Boss, she's only been here." "The Castellanos have a new consigliere from the old country. His dialect is difficult. I need her ears." Antonio's tone left no room for argument. After Marco left, Lucy found her voice. "If it wasn't the Castellanos who attacked you, then who?" Antonio studied her with new interest. Most people would be figuring out how to escape, not analyzing mafia politics. Lucy straightened in her chair. "My situation seems non-negotiable. Understanding keeps me alive." A slow smile spread across his face. "Smart girl." That evening, Lucy was given a room in the East Wing, luxurious but clearly designed to keep her contained. The windows didn't open, and a guard stood outside her door. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, trembling now that she was alone. What had she gotten herself into? A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, a maid stood with a garment bag. "Mr. Ricci requests you wear this tomorrow," the woman said, hanging the bag in the closet before leaving. Lucy unzipped it to reveal an elegant burgundy dress, modest yet sophisticated. Professional enough for a business meeting, expensive enough to indicate her value to the organization. The calculated nature of the gift sent chills down her spine. Later that night, unable to sleep, Lucy ventured to the balcony outside the hallway. The guard had stepped away momentarily. She needed air, needed to think. "Trouble sleeping?" Antonio's voice came from the shadows, causing her to gasp. He stepped forward, still in his dress shirt but with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscled forearms and a complex tattoo that disappeared beneath the fabric. Lucy realized this was the first time she'd seen him without a full suit. Slightly less armored, marginally more human. "I'm adjusting," she replied carefully. Antonio leaned against the railing, looking out at his empire. "Tomorrow will be dangerous. The Castellanos are not to be trusted." "Then why go?" "Because if they're telling the truth, I need to know who's trying to start a war." His profile was sharp against the moonlight. "Wars are bad for business." Lucy studied him. "And if it's a trap?" Antonio turned, his dark eyes capturing hers. "Then we'll handle it." The way he looked at her made Lucy's heart race, not entirely from fear. There was something magnetic about him, this man who commanded death with a whisper. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "There must be professional translators you could hire, ones with experience in your world." Antonio stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. Professional translators have professional loyalties. Their services can be bought by anyone. And I can't? You have a sick mother, a modest apartment, and no connections to any family. You're intelligent but invisible. Perfect for what I need. His gaze traveled over her face, lingering on her lips for a heartbeat too long. Besides, your eyes betray every thought. You couldn't lie to me if you tried. Lucy's breath caught as his hand reached up, one finger gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent electricity down her spine. "Get some sleep, Lucy," he murmured, his voice lower, intimate. "Tomorrow you enter the lion's den with me." He turned and walked away, leaving Lucy frozen, her skin burning where he'd touched her, terrified by the realization forming in her mind. The most dangerous part of her situation wasn't the rival families or illegal operations. It was how her body responded to Antonio Ricci's presence. And somehow, she suspected he knew it. The warehouse loomed against the gray sky, its abandoned facade a perfect cover for the meeting about to take place. Lucy sat beside Antonio in his armored Bentley, the burgundy dress hugging her curves modestly while still marking her as someone of importance. Not quite arm candy, not quite staff. Ambiguous. Dangerous. "Remember," Antonio said, his voice low as the car stopped. "You translate everything, even whispers. Watch their body language when they think no one understands." Lucy nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. "And if it goes wrong?" Antonio's eyes darkened. "Stay behind me." Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. A long table divided the space, with the Castellano family on one side, 5 men including their aging patriarch, Vincent Castellano, and the new consigliere, a hawk-faced Sicilian man who watched them enter with calculating eyes. Antonio walked with predatory grace, his hand occasionally brushing Lucy's lower back in a gesture that appeared possessive to observers. She understood it was theatrical, establishing her as someone under his protection, but her body didn't recognize the distinction. Each touch burned through the fabric of her dress. Greetings were exchanged with cold civility. Lucy stood slightly behind Antonio, observing as instructed. The meeting began in English, but occasionally the Sicilian consigliera, introduced as Salvatore Buscetta, would lean to whisper in Vincent's ear. After 20 minutes of circling around accusations, Antonio addressed the elephant in the room. 3 of my men died in that restaurant. If it wasn't your family, Vincent, then you know who it was." As Vincent prepared to respond, Salvatore whispered rapidly in a thick Sicilian dialect. Lucy strained to catch it. "Tell him nothing. His woman watches too carefully. Pretty thing. Wonder if she screams when he—" Lucy's sharp intake of breath caught Antonio's attention. His eyes flicked to her momentarily before returning to Vincent. "My associate finds your companion intriguing," Vincent translated smoothly, sanitizing Salvatore's words. Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. "She is indeed intriguing." Under the table, Lucy felt Antonio's hand squeeze her knee. Once, twice, 3 times. Somehow she understood. He wanted 3 words translated. She leaned in as if shy, whispering. He said, "Tell him nothing." Antonio's expression never changed, but his thumb traced a small circle on her knee in acknowledgement. The touch sent an inappropriate shiver through her body despite the tension of the moment. The meeting continued, with Lucy occasionally translating Salvatore's whispered comments, most of which were strategic, some vulgar. The pieces began forming a clearer picture. Someone was intentionally pitting the families against each other. As they prepared to leave, Salvatore approached Lucy directly, speaking in his native dialect. "Your boss thinks he protects you, pretty one. But walls have ears, and yours are too valuable now." Lucy translated for Antonio, keeping her voice steady despite the threat. Antonio's face hardened as he placed a proprietary hand on the small of her back. "Tell him," Antonio instructed, "that what's mine stays mine." Lucy relayed the message, watching Salvatore's eyebrows raise in amusement, as if Antonio had confirmed something he suspected. Outside, hurrying to the car through a light rain, Antonio maintained his possessive stance, his body partially shielding hers. Only when the car doors closed and they pulled away did he exhale heavily. "What else did he say? Salvatore?" Antonio demanded. Lucy swallowed. "Several things. He mentioned a shipment arriving Thursday instead of Friday. That Vincent doesn't know about the change." She paused. "And he commented on us. He thinks I'm that we're my lover," Antonio finished bluntly, watching her blush creep up her neck. "Good." "Good?" Lucy echoed, confused. "If they think you're in my bed, they'll assume that's why I keep you close. They won't suspect you're gathering intelligence." His eyes were calculating. "It's protection, in a way." Lucy looked away, unreasonably stung by the clinical explanation. "And if they target me because of this assumption?" Antonio's hand caught her chin, turning her face toward him. The unexpected contact made her breath hitch. "No one touches what's mine, Lucy." His voice had dropped to a dangerous register, his eyes intense. "Not even as a negotiation tactic." For a moment, neither spoke, caught in a charged silence. Antonio's thumb brushed against her lower lip in what might have been an accident but felt deliberate. Lucy couldn't breathe, couldn't think, caught between fear and something far more dangerous. The car turned sharply, breaking the moment. Antonio withdrew his hand and looked out the window. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night," he said, his voice businesslike again. "The Castellanos will be there. So will the heads of the other 3 families. I need your eyes and ears." Lucy found her voice. "You want me to pretend to be your date?" "No," Antonio replied, his gaze returning to her with smoldering intensity. "I want you to be my date. The distinction matters in my world." Before Lucy could respond, gunshots exploded around them. The driver cursed as bullets hit the bulletproof glass. Antonio pushed Lucy down onto the seat, covering her body with his own as the car swerved violently. Pressed beneath him, Lucy could feel Antonio's heartbeat, strong and steady despite the attack. His cologne filled her senses, his weight both frightening and thrilling. "Stay down," he ordered, his lips against her ear sending shivers down her spine despite the danger. The car accelerated, making a series of sharp turns. Antonio's men returned fire from escort vehicles. Through it all, Antonio remained a shield over Lucy, one hand holding a gun, the other braced beside her head. When the shooting stopped and the car straightened on a clear road, Antonio didn't immediately move. For 3 heartbeats they remained pressed together, his eyes locked with hers in the dim back seat. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice huskier than usual. Lucy shook her head, acutely aware of every point where their bodies connected. "Good," he murmured, finally shifting away, though not completely. "Because I need you alive, Lucy." The way he said it, with unexpected softness, made her wonder if he meant for more than just translation services. And that possibility terrified her more than the bullets. The gala sparkled with wealth and hidden danger. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors where killers and criminals mingled with politicians and police chiefs, all accepting champagne from silver trays while pretending not to know the source of the donations funding the children's hospital wing being celebrated. Lucy stood beside Antonio, breathtaking in a midnight blue gown that left her shoulders bare. Diamond earrings, on loan from Antonio, caught the light with every movement. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, thumb occasionally brushing against her bare skin in a way that seemed both calculated for their audience and disturbingly intimate. The mayor's wife speaks Sicilian, Antonio murmured against her ear, using their apparent intimacy as cover for instructions. She's having an affair with Vincent Castellano's son. I need to know if she mentions any movement of police patrols around the docks. Lucy nodded almost imperceptibly, taking a sip of champagne she had no intention of finishing. Clear-headed was the only way to survive tonight. As they circulated through the crowd, Lucy became increasingly aware of the stares they attracted. Women assessed her with envy and speculation, wondering if she was Antonio's latest conquest or something more permanent. Men looked at her with either appreciation or calculation, an asset to potentially be used against the Ricci family. "They're all watching us," she whispered during a moment alone. Antonio's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Then let's give them something to see." Before she could react, his arm slid around her waist, pulling her against him. His other hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. For a heart-stopping moment, Lucy thought he would kiss her, here in front of everyone. Instead, his lips brushed against her cheek, moving to her ear. "Salvatore just entered with a woman I don't recognize. You're 3:00. Lucy struggled to focus, her body betraying her with a shiver as Antonio's breath warmed her neck. She turned slightly, spotting Salvatore with a striking blonde woman in red. "That's not his wife," Antonio continued, playing the besotted lover while conducting surveillance. "Find out who she is." The evening progressed like a dangerous dance. Lucy used her unassuming appearance and language skills to gather fragments of conversation, while Antonio conducted business with handshakes and veiled threats. She learned the blonde was connected to the Russian Bratva, that shipments were being redirected, that someone was paying for inside information on both the Ricci and Castellano operations. When Lucy finally maneuvered close enough to overhear Salvatore speaking with the blonde in his native dialect, his words made her blood run cold. "The translator must be eliminated," he was saying. "She understands too much. If Ricci's weakness for beautiful things hasn't clouded his judgment, he'd see the risk." "Tonight?" the blonde asked in heavily accented Sicilian. "No. After we confirm the information about the ledgers, we need to know if she's found them." Lucy maintained her composure through years of practice hiding her mother's illness from social services. She laughed at something a nearby guest said, pretending she hadn't just heard her death being arranged. What ledgers? She'd seen nothing unusual in her translations. Across the room, Antonio was watching her with dark intensity, even as he conversed with the police commissioner. Something in her expression must have alerted him because he disengaged smoothly and made his way to her side. "Dance with me," he commanded softly, leading her to the floor where other couples swayed to the orchestra. His hand on her waist burned through the thin fabric as he pulled her closer than propriety dictated. Lucy followed his lead, using the proximity to whisper what she'd overheard. Antonio's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened to obsidian. "Ledgers?" he murmured. "Interesting. They're planning to kill me," Lucy added, her voice barely audible despite their closeness. His arm tightened around her. "That won't happen. You can't guarantee." "I can, and I do." His certainty was absolute. "No one touches what's mine." There it was again. That possessive declaration that should have offended her, but instead sent heat coursing through her veins. His thumb traced small circles against her back as they turned across the floor, each point of contact between them charged with something beyond their pretense. "We're leaving," Antonio decided abruptly. "Something's not right." As they made their way toward the exit, Vincent Castellano intercepted them. "Leaving so soon, Ricci? When we have so much to discuss?" The older man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Antonio's expression remained impassive. "Another time, perhaps. My companion isn't feeling well." Vincent's gaze shifted to Lucy, assessing. "Such a lovely translator you found. It would be a shame if anything happened to her." The threat hung in the air between them. Lucy felt Antonio's body tense beside her. "Indeed it would," Antonio replied, his tone conversational but with steel underneath. "Because it would mean war, Vincent. Total and complete. Not a negotiation or territory dispute. Extinction." The two men stared at each other for a long moment before Vincent inclined his head slightly. "Feel better, my dear," he said to Lucy before walking away. Antonio guided her outside with urgency, his men closing ranks around them as they approached the car. "There are ledgers in my study," Antonio said once they were inside the vehicle. "Financial records going back 5 years. Someone is looking for them." "I haven't seen anything like that," Lucy insisted, "because they're hidden." His expression was grim. "The question is, how did they know about them at all?" The implications were clear. There was a traitor in Antonio's organization. Someone close enough to know about secret financial records. "We can't go back to the mansion," Antonio decided. "Not tonight." "Where then?" Lucy asked, fear finally creeping into her voice. Antonio gave instructions to the driver, then turned back to her. In the dim light of the car, his features were shadows and angles, dangerous and beautiful. "A safe house. Just you and me." Lucy's heart hammered in her chest. "For my protection?" Something shifted in Antonio's gaze, something hungry and barely restrained. Among other reasons. As the car wound through darkened streets, Lucy realized they were being followed. Antonio noticed too, cursing softly. "Change of plans," he barked to the driver. "Lose them, then emergency protocol 3. What happened next was a blur of screeching tires and sharp turns. At some point, Antonio pulled Lucy down onto the seat again, shielding her with his body. Unlike the previous attack, no shots were fired, but the pursuit was relentless. "They're trying to track us to the safe house," Antonio explained, his weight pressing Lucy into the leather seat. "We need to separate." Lucy's eyes widened. "You want me to go alone?" "Not alone. With Marco." Antonio's expression was torn between strategic necessity and reluctance. "I'll lead them away. Meet you later." Before Lucy could protest, Antonio was giving rapid instructions through his phone. When he finished, his attention returned to her fully, his face inches from hers in the confined space. "Trust no one but Marco and me," he said urgently. "Not even my other men." "I'm scared," Lucy admitted, hating the vulnerability but unable to hide it. Antonio's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. "Fear keeps you sharp. Use it." The car screeched to a halt in an alley. Another identical Bentley waited with Marco at the wheel. 60 seconds to transfer, Antonio instructed. "Stay low." As Lucy prepared to move to the other vehicle, Antonio caught her arm, pulling her back. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips. His breathing changed. Instead, he pressed something cold and metal into her hand. "Gun," he explained. "Safety's off. Point and shoot if anyone but Marco or I approaches you." Lucy stared at the weapon, then back at Antonio. "I don't know how—" "You're a survivor, Lucy." His faith in her was startling. "You'll figure it out." The door opened. Marco was there, ushering her quickly to the other car. As she slipped into the back seat, Lucy looked back. Antonio stood watching her, powerful and dangerous in his tuxedo, like a predator in formal wear. Their eyes locked for one electric moment before both cars sped off in opposite directions. Only then did Lucy notice she was still wearing the diamond earrings, and that her hand clutching the gun bore a platinum and diamond ring she'd never seen before. When had he slipped it on her finger? The note tucked beside it answered her question. "If separated, you're my fiancé seeking shelter. The ring opens doors. A.R." Lucy stared at the massive diamond glittering on her finger, understanding dawning. This wasn't just protection. It was a declaration to anyone who saw it. Touch her, an answer to Antonio Ricci. The safe house was a luxury penthouse overlooking the city, all glass and steel with security features that would impress military contractors. Marco escorted Lucy inside, did a thorough sweep, then took up position in the hallway outside. His instructions had been clear. Protect her with his life. Lucy stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, Antonio's gun heavy in her purse, his ring heavy on her finger. The city lights blurred as tears finally came, delayed shock from the night's events. What had her life become in less than a week? Her phone buzzed, a burner Antonio had given her that morning. The message was brief. Safe. Stay inside. We'll come for you by dawn. No signature was needed. Lucy clutched the phone, relief flooding through her at knowing Antonio had escaped his pursuers. The intensity of that relief should have frightened her, this attachment forming to a dangerous man who had essentially kidnapped her into his world. Yet she couldn't deny the electricity between them, the way her body responded to his touch, the flutter in her stomach when he looked at her with those dark, intense eyes. Hours passed. Lucy showered, washing away the gala's perfume and tension, then changed into clothes laid out for her, silk pajamas and a matching robe that fit perfectly. The fact that Antonio had prepared this place with items in her size was both thoughtful and unsettling. Sleep refused to come. Every sound had her reaching for the gun on the nightstand. At 3 a.m., she gave up and wandered back to the living room windows, watching the sleeping city. The view is better from the balcony. Lucy whirled around, heart racing, to find Antonio standing in the entryway. He'd changed from his tuxedo into black pants and a gray Henley that clung to his muscular frame. A small cut above his eyebrow was the only evidence of whatever confrontation had occurred after they separated. "You're hurt," she said, moving toward him without thinking. Antonio remained still as she approached, his eyes following her movement like a predator allowing prey to come closer. When she reached up to examine the cut, he caught her wrist gently. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but didn't release her. They stood frozen in that almost embrace, the air between them charged with possibility and danger. Lucy was acutely aware of her silk-clad body, of Antonio's proximity, of the loneliness of the penthouse. "Did you lose them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A dangerous smile curved Antonio's lips. They lost their lives. Lucy should have been horrified, should have pulled away. Instead, she remained still, accepting this brutal truth about the man before her. "Did you discover anything about the ledgers?" "We have a traitor," Antonio confirmed, finally releasing her wrist only to trail his fingers lightly up her arm. "Someone close to me." "Who?" His expression hardened. "I have suspicions. 3 names." He stepped closer, crowding her personal space in a way that made breathing difficult. "But right now, I'm more concerned about keeping you alive." "Why?" Lucy challenged, finding unexpected courage. "I'm just a translator, replaceable." Antonio's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip in a touch that was definitely not accidental this time. "No, Lucy, you're not replaceable." The confession hung between them, charged with implications neither was ready to voice. "The ring," Lucy said, holding up her hand where the diamond caught the city lights. "This is rather extreme for a cover story." Antonio's eyes darkened as he took her hand, running his thumb over the platinum band. "Is it?" Lucy's breath caught. "Antonio. My enemies would hesitate to harm my translator," he said, voice low and intimate. "They wouldn't dare touch my fiancé." "It's not real," Lucy reminded herself. "Isn't it?" Antonio challenged, stepping closer until bare inches separated them. His hand still held hers, his other moving to her waist. "Your body responds to me, Lucy. Your pulse quickens when I'm near. Your pupils dilate when I touch you." As if to prove his point, his hand slid from her waist to the small of her back, drawing her against him. Lucy couldn't suppress her gasp at the contact, at the hard planes of his body against her softer curves. "This game is dangerous," she whispered, hands coming up to rest against his chest, not pushing him away but not pulling him closer either. Everything about my life is dangerous, Antonio murmured, his face lowering toward hers. But this, you, might be worth the risk. Lucy knew she should resist, knew this attraction could only lead to complication and heartbreak, or worse. Yet as Antonio's lips hovered a breath away from hers, she found herself rising on her toes, eliminating the final distance between them. Their lips had barely brushed, the lightest, most tentative contact, when the penthouse door burst open. Marco stood there, gun drawn, expression grim. "Boss," he said urgently, "we've been compromised." Antonio pulled away from Lucy with obvious reluctance, instantly transforming back into the ruthless mafia leader. "How?" "The ring," Marco explained. "It's been flagged at every jeweler in the city. They're tracking it. We need to move. Now." Antonio cursed viciously, then turned to Lucy. "Take it off," he ordered. Lucy removed the ring, oddly bereft as Antonio pocketed it. How did they know to track it? Antonio's expression was murderous. "Because I purchased it 3 days ago. Few people knew that." He turned to Marco. "Secure the garage exit. We leave in 2 minutes." As Marco left, Antonio strode to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a safe. He entered a code and withdrew several bundles of cash, a passport, and a smaller gun, which he handed to Lucy. "This one's easier to handle," he explained. "Just point and squeeze." Lucy stared at the weapon, then back at him. "Antonio, I can't just disappear. My mother is being moved to a secure medical facility as we speak," he finished. "I made arrangements after the gala. She'll be safe." The fact that Antonio had thought of her mother, had prioritized her safety without being asked, struck Lucy deeply. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "I'm not worth the trouble." Antonio caught her chin, tilting her face up to his. In his eyes, Lucy saw something raw and honest beneath the calculated control. "You've seen too much to simply let you go," he said, his tone making it unclear if this was threat or protection. "And I've seen too much in you to lose you now." The almost kiss lingered between them, unresolved tension crackling in the air despite the danger surrounding them. For a moment, Lucy thought Antonio might finish what they'd started. Danger be damned. Instead, he pressed his forehead briefly against hers, an unexpectedly tender gesture from such a dangerous man. "We need to go," he said reluctantly, pulling away. "Stay close to me." As they moved toward the door, Lucy realized with startling clarity that she was no longer afraid of Antonio Ricci. She was afraid of the growing certainty that, given the choice, she would choose to stay with him, even knowing exactly what kind of man he was. And that terrified her more than all the guns and rival families combined. The safe house had been compromised, but Antonio was prepared. He led Lucy through a hidden service elevator that descended to an underground garage where 3 identical black SUVs waited. "Split up," Antonio ordered his men. Protocol 7. As drivers took the wheel of each vehicle, Antonio guided Lucy into the middle SUV, his hand protectively at the small of her back. Once inside, he pulled her down below window level. "Stay down until I say otherwise," he instructed, his voice tight with controlled anger. Someone close to him had betrayed him, someone who knew about the ring, about Lucy. The convoy pulled out, each vehicle heading in different directions. Lucy's heart pounded as she crouched on the floor, Antonio's hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. She could feel the tension radiating from him. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Somewhere no one knows about," Antonio replied. "Not even Marco." The implication was clear. He trusted no one now except her. The realization sent a conflicted thrill through Lucy. After an hour of evasive driving, they abandoned the SUV in a shopping mall parking garage and transferred to a nondescript sedan. Antonio drove this time, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for tails. "I don't understand," Lucy said as dawn broke over the highway. "Why are the ledgers so important? Why am I?" Antonio's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "The ledgers contain more than financial records. They contain names, Politicians, judges, police chiefs, everyone on my payroll and the Castellanos. Evidence that could destroy both families. And me? Antonio glanced at her, his expression softening momentarily. You understand dialects even my Sicilian associates struggle with. You've heard things, names, connections. To them, you're a liability who knows too much. To you? Lucy dared to ask. Antonio's jaw tightened. To me, you're becoming a necessity. The raw honesty in his voice silenced her. They drove in tense quiet until reaching a dense forest area. Antonio turned onto a narrow dirt road that wound through towering pines until a small rustic cabin appeared. It looks modest, Lucy observed cautiously. A ghost of a smile touched Antonio's lips. Appearances deceive. It's fortified with security systems that would impress the Pentagon. Inside, the cabin revealed its deception. Though maintaining a rustic exterior, the interior featured state-of-the-art technology, comfortable furnishings, and bulletproof windows. A hidden panel revealed an impressive weapons cache. My father built this place, Antonio explained, securing the perimeter via an electronic panel. No one in the current organization knows about it. Not even Marco? Lucy asked, remembering his most trusted lieutenant. Antonio's expression darkened. Especially not Marco. The implication stunned Lucy. You think Marco betrayed you? But he's been protecting me? Perhaps to monitor you, Antonio countered, checking his phone. He knew about the ring. He arranged the jeweler. His eyes met hers, intense and dangerous. I trust no one right now except you, Lucy. Why me? She asked, genuinely confused. You barely know me. Antonio approached her slowly, like a predator stalking prey, but his expression held something beyond hunger, vulnerability perhaps. Because I've watched you closely for days, he said softly. You've had multiple opportunities to betray me, to escape. You've shown loyalty despite being thrust into this life against your will. He stood before her now, close enough that Lucy could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his expensive cologne mingled with the dangerous scent that was uniquely him. And, he continued, his voice dropping to a husky register that sent shivers down her spine, you're the first woman in years who looks at me and sees the man, not just the monster. Lucy's breath caught as Antonio's hand came up to cup her face. Unlike their interrupted moment at the penthouse, there was no hesitation now. His lips claimed hers with restrained hunger, as if testing her response before committing fully. For one heartbeat, Lucy remained frozen in shock. Then instinct took over and she responded, her hands gripping his shirt as she kissed him back with equal intensity. What began as a test quickly ignited into something more dangerous. Antonio backed her against the wall, one hand tangling in her hair, the other at her waist, holding her against him as the kiss deepened into something primal and needy. Lucy knew she should stop this madness. He was a killer, a criminal, a man who had essentially kidnapped her into his world of violence. Yet she couldn't deny the electricity between them, the way her body responded to his touch as if it had been waiting for him all along. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Antonio rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if gathering control. This complicates things, he murmured, his thumb tracing her swollen lips. Lucy gave a breathless laugh. You think? The cabin became their fortress for 3 tension-filled days. Antonio maintained contact with only his most distant associates, trying to smoke out the traitor without revealing his location. Lucy watched him work, fascinated by the strategic mind behind the dangerous exterior. By night, they shared the cabin's only bed, though Antonio maintained a gentleman's distance despite the electricity still crackling between them since their kiss. That single explosive moment had changed everything, yet resolved nothing. On the 3rd morning, Lucy woke to find Antonio already dressed, standing by the window with a satellite phone. Are you certain? He was saying, his voice tight with controlled rage. Proof? Lucy sat up, instantly alert. Something had changed. When Antonio ended the call, his expression was thunderous. "We need to move. Now." "What happened?" "Marco is dead," Antonio said flatly, gathering weapons from the hidden panel. "His body was found in the river, tortured first." Lucy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh God, you thought he was the traitor, but he wasn't," Antonio finished grimly. "He was loyal, and someone killed him for it." Guilt shadowed his features briefly before the mask of the ruthless boss returned. Lucy understood the weight of mistrusting a loyal man who'd died protecting Antonio's interests. They packed quickly, taking only essentials. As Antonio loaded the car, Lucy noticed him placing a small metal box in the trunk, handling it with particular care. "The ledgers," she guessed. Antonio nodded. "I retrieved them before the gala. They've been here all along." "Where are we going now?" "To end this," he replied with cold finality. "I know who the traitor is." The drive back toward the city was tense with unspoken questions. Finally, Lucy broke the silence. "Who betrayed you?" Antonio's jaw tightened. "Paolo Vincenti, my consigliere before Marco. The man I considered a second father." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "He's been working with the Russians, using the Castellanos as cover." "The restaurant owner?" Lucy asked, confused. "Different Paolo. This one retired last year, supposedly. Now I know why. He's been building a shadow organization to take over both families." As they approached the city limits, Antonio pulled into an abandoned gas station and retrieved a burner phone. "I need to make arrangements. Wait here." Lucy watched through the windshield as he paced outside, his expression growing darker with each call. When he returned, his face was set in grim determination. "Tonight we meet with Vincent Castellano," he announced. "Neutral ground. We're combining forces to eliminate Paolo." Lucy's eyes widened. "You're working with your enemies?" "In this business, today's enemy can be tomorrow's ally when facing a greater threat." Antonio's expression softened slightly as he studied her. "You don't have to come." "I can arrange safe passage." "No," Lucy interrupted with surprising firmness. "I'm coming with you." Antonio's eyes darkened with something beyond appreciation. Desire, respect, perhaps even something deeper that neither dared name. "Paolo will expect me to bring a translator for the meeting," he reasoned. "No one knows yet that you understand more than just languages." The drive resumed in charged silence. Lucy noticed Antonio watching her in brief glances, as if memorizing her features. At a red light, he suddenly reached across to take her hand. "If anything happens to me," he said quietly, "there's an account in your name. Enough to disappear, to take care of your mother." Lucy's throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." "It's necessary." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Lucy, if I don't survive tonight—" "You will!" she interrupted fiercely. "We will!" The light changed, but Antonio didn't immediately drive. Instead, he leaned across the center console and kissed her, briefly but with surprising tenderness. "For luck," he murmured against her lips before pulling away. They arrived at an industrial warehouse by the docks as dusk settled over the city. Vincent Castellano's men patrolled the perimeter, nodding respectfully as Antonio approached with Lucy at his side. The temporary alliance had clearly been communicated. Inside, Vincent waited with his inner circle. The old Don looked frailer than at the gala, the strain of betrayal evident in his features. When he spotted Lucy, surprise flickered across his face. "You still keep your translator close, Antonio?" There was a question in his tone. "Closer than ever," Antonio replied, his hand settling possessively at the small of Lucy's back. The gesture wasn't for show this time, she realized. It was instinctive, protective. "The meeting is set," Vincent continued. "Paolo thinks he's negotiating a truce between us. He doesn't know we've discovered his game." "Where?" "The old cathedral, 1 hour." Vincent's shrewd eyes moved between Antonio and Lucy. Your woman should not attend. Paolo knows she understands too much. She stays with me, Antonio replied, brooking no argument. As they left to prepare, Lucy tugged Antonio into a shadowed alcove. He's right. I'll be a target. Antonio's hands came up to frame her face, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Everyone I've ever trusted is either dead or has betrayed me, he said quietly. Except you. I need you there. The naked vulnerability in his voice undid her. Lucy rose on her toes and kissed him with all the confused, complicated emotions swirling inside her. Fear, desire, and something dangerously close to love for this beautiful, deadly man. Then let's finish this, she whispered against his lips. Together. The abandoned cathedral stood silhouetted against the night sky, its once holy grounds now consecrated only by violence and betrayal. Lucy sat beside Antonio in his car, watching as Castellano's men secured the perimeter. The temporary alliance between rival families had the docks buzzing with tension. Wear this, Antonio said, handing her a sleek, bulletproof vest. His fingers lingered as he helped her adjust it beneath her jacket, each touch charged with unspoken emotion. Will it come to that? She asked quietly. Antonio's eyes were hard obsidian. Paolo won't come alone. He's had months to build his shadow army. As they approached the cathedral, Lucy felt eyes tracking their movement. Antonio kept her close, his body partially shielding hers as they entered through massive wooden doors that groaned like mourners. Inside, votive candles cast eerie shadows across broken pews and crumbling saints. Vincent Castellano waited at the altar with 4 armed guards. The old Don nodded respectfully to Antonio. Tonight, they were reluctant allies against a common betrayer. Paolo is bringing 6 men, Vincent said without preamble. My sources confirmed he's been siphoning soldiers from both our families for months. Building loyalty through promises and threats. And the Russians? Antonio asked, waiting to see who emerges victorious before choosing sides. Vincent's shrewd eyes shifted to Lucy. Your translator understands what's at stake? Before Antonio could answer, Lucy spoke directly to the rival Don. I understand loyalty, Mr. Castellano. Something Paolo seems to have forgotten. A whisper of approval crossed the old man's face. She has spirit, Antonio. Rare in our world. Further conversation ceased as footsteps echoed from the cathedral entrance. Paolo Vincenti strode in with the confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. Tall, silver-haired, with aristocratic features that masked a snake's heart, he'd been Antonio's mentor and advisor for decades. Lucy felt Antonio tense beside her, the betrayal still raw despite his controlled expression. Antonio, Vincent. Paolo nodded to each Don as if they were still equals. His gaze lingered on Lucy with calculated interest. And the famous translator. How convenient that you're all here together. Convenient for whom? Antonio asked coolly. Paolo smiled thinly. For business, of course. I've come to negotiate terms of surrender. Vincent barked a harsh laugh. Surrender? You overestimate your position, old friend. Do I? Paolo's smile remained fixed as he glanced at his watch. In approximately 30 seconds, you'll understand exactly how strong my position is. Lucy's instincts flared. She grabbed Antonio's arm, whispering urgently, It's a trap. No sooner had the words left her lips than the cathedral doors burst open. Armed men flooded in. Not just 6 as promised, but at least 20. Among them, Lucy recognized the blonde woman from the gala on the arm of a stern-faced Russian. You see, Paolo continued calmly as his forces surrounded them. I've made new arrangements. The Russians prefer my leadership to the antiquated methods of both your families. Antonio's expression remained impassive, but Lucy felt his muscles coil, ready to spring. Castellano's men had drawn weapons, creating a standoff. You disappoint me, Paolo, Antonio said quietly. Not because you betrayed me, but because you've become predictable. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Paolo's face. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this? Antonio continued. That Vincent and I wouldn't have our own contingencies? As if on cue, the cathedral's confessional doors opened and the hidden choir balconies above, filled with armed Ricci and Castellano soldiers, at least 30 men with automatic weapons trained on Paolo's forces. Lucy watched the blood drain from Paolo's face as he realized his mistake. The blonde Russian woman was already edging toward the door, loyalty evaporating with the changing odds. This could still end peacefully, Paolo attempted, desperation creeping into his voice. The ledgers. If you give me the ledgers, You'll what? Antonio interrupted. Disappear? Leave my territory, my business, my people alone? His voice dropped dangerously. Leave Lucy alone? The personal nature of the question seemed to surprise even Vincent. Paolo's eyes narrowed as they moved between Antonio and Lucy, reassessing. So it's true, Paolo said softly. The great Antonio Ricci has found his weakness, a waitress who understands old dialects. Not a weakness, Antonio corrected, a strength you never understood. Loyalty isn't bought, Paolo. It's earned. In the split second of tense silence that followed, Lucy noticed a subtle movement, Paolo's hand shifting toward his jacket. Without conscious thought, she shoved Antonio sideways just as Paolo drew his gun. The shot echoed through the cathedral as all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from all sides as Paolo's men and the combined Ricci Castellano forces engaged. Antonio pulled Lucy down behind a heavy marble pillar, shielding her with his body. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his own weapon. Through the chaos, Lucy saw Paolo fleeing toward a side exit. Antonio, he's getting away. Antonio's eyes tracked his former mentor. Stay here, he commanded before darting between pillars in pursuit. Vincent appeared beside Lucy, surprisingly agile for his age, taking cover behind the same pillar. Your Antonio moves fast, the old Don commented as bullets chipped away at centuries-old stone around them. He's not my... Lucy began automatically. Vincent's knowing smile stopped her. Girl, I've been in this business 60 years. I know love when I see it, even when it's between enemies. Before Lucy could respond, a scream of rage echoed from the side chapel where Antonio had pursued Paolo. Without thinking, she broke cover, running toward the sound, despite Vincent calling for her to stop. What she found would haunt her forever. Antonio stood over Paolo's body, gun still raised, his face a mask of cold fury and satisfaction. Blood pooled around the traitor's head, spreading across the chapel's marble floor in a crimson halo. Antonio, Lucy whispered, her voice breaking through his trance. He turned, eyes still dark with bloodlust before focusing on her. The transformation was immediate, the killer receding, the man emerging. You shouldn't be here, he said roughly, tucking away his weapon. I heard you shout, she explained, unable to look away from Paolo's lifeless form. This was Antonio's world. Death dealt swiftly to those who betrayed him, a world she had somehow become part of. Antonio stepped between her and the body, blocking her view. His hands gently framed her face, forcing her to look at him instead. Are you hurt? Lucy shook her head, trying to process the violence surrounding them, the gunfire still echoing in the main cathedral. The others are handling it, Antonio finished. He studied her face intently. This changes things for you, doesn't it? Seeing this side of me. Before Lucy could answer, a bullet splintered the wooden panel beside them. Antonio immediately shoved her behind a pillar, shielding her as he returned fire. The blonde Russian, he growled, spotting their attacker. She's trying to secure the ledgers for herself. Lucy peered around Antonio to see the woman from the gala advancing methodically through the chapel, eliminating wounded men from both sides with cold efficiency. We need to move, Antonio whispered, checking his ammunition. The ledgers are in my car. If she gets them, your empire falls, Lucy finished, understanding completely now. Antonio's expression shifted, something like regret flickering across his features. Lucy, I never meant for you to be caught in this war. Yet here I am, she replied with surprising calm. What's the plan? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Pride, perhaps, at her resilience. Back exit through the rectory. Stay close. They moved silently through shadow and candlelight, avoiding the main conflict still raging in the cathedral nave. Antonio led with his weapon raised, Lucy following close behind. They had nearly reached the rectory door when the blonde Russian emerged from a side corridor. Mr. Ricci, she said in a heavily accented voice, her gun trained on them. The ledgers, please. Antonio pushed Lucy slightly behind him. They're not here. The woman smiled coldly. No? Then perhaps your translator knows where they are. I hear she knows many things. Her gun shifted toward Lucy. Tell me, or watch him die first. Time slowed to crystalline clarity. Lucy saw Antonio tensing to lunge, knew he would take a bullet to give her a chance to escape. In that moment, she made her choice completely and irrevocably. I'll tell you, Lucy said, stepping out from behind Antonio despite his attempt to shield her. But you should know something first. The Russian arched an eyebrow, curiosity momentarily overriding caution. What's that? Lucy smiled. I've been learning more than just translation these past days. In one fluid movement, she reached beneath her jacket, withdrew the slim pistol Antonio had given her, and fired. The Russian woman's expression registered shock before she crumpled to the ground. Antonio stared at Lucy in astonishment. She was equally shocked, her hands trembling as she lowered the gun. You've been practicing, he said finally, something like admiration in his voice. When you were making calls, Lucy admitted. I figured it might come in handy. A crash from the main cathedral reminded them of the ongoing battle. Antonio took Lucy's hand, leading her through the rectory and out a hidden door to the church grounds. They sprinted across the cemetery, weaving between ancient headstones until reaching the car. Once inside, Antonio didn't immediately start the engine. Instead, he turned to Lucy, his expression intense with something beyond the adrenaline of battle. You saved my life in there, he said quietly. You killed for me. Lucy stared at her hands, still feeling the weapon's recoil. I killed for us, she corrected, the magnitude of that truth settling heavily between them. Antonio reached across, taking her trembling hands in his. When Lucy finally looked up, she found vulnerability in his eyes that the world's most dangerous mafia boss would show to no one else. There was a moment in there, he admitted, when I thought you'd look at me, at what I am, what I do, and finally run. Lucy's throat tightened with emotion. Where would I run to, Antonio? You've become my world. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Antonio pulled her across the center console and kissed her with desperate intensity. Not the controlled passion of their previous encounters, but something wild and grateful and alive. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. We need to get somewhere safe, he murmured. Vincent will handle cleanup. By tomorrow, both families will know the traitor is dead and the alliance holds. And us? Lucy dared to ask. Antonio's eyes met hers, more open than she'd ever seen them. That depends on you. This life, my life, it's not what you chose. But it's what I'm choosing now, Lucy replied with quiet certainty. As they drove away from the cathedral, leaving death and betrayal behind, Lucy realized she had crossed an irrevocable line. She was no longer just Antonio Ricci's translator. She was his partner, his protector, his equal in this dangerous new world. And somehow, despite everything, it felt right. 1 month later, Lucy stood on the balcony of Antonio's mansion, watching the sunset paint the manicured grounds in gold. So much had changed since that bloody night at the cathedral. The alliance with the Castellanos had solidified into a tentative peace. The Russian faction had retreated after their representative's death. Antonio's position as head of the Ricci family was stronger than ever, and Lucy was no longer just his translator. "Beautiful view," Antonio's voice came from behind her, followed by the warmth of his body as he wrapped his arms around her waist. His chin rested on her shoulder as they watched the fading light together. Lucy agreed, leaning back against his solid chest. "Hard to believe a month ago I was running for my life." "And now?" Antonio asked, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. Lucy turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had irrevocably changed her life. "Now I'm exactly where I want to be." The diamond ring glittered on her finger, not the decoy from that dangerous night, but a new one, given with genuine intent 3 days ago. Lucy still marveled at how natural it felt, this transition from captive to willing partner. "Your mother's doctors called," Antonio said, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender familiarity. "The new treatment is showing promising results." Lucy smiled gratefully. Antonio had spared no expense in providing the best medical care for her mother, moving her to a private facility under constant protection. It was one of countless gestures that had proven his devotion went beyond mere possession or desire. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing he understood all she couldn't articulate. Antonio's expression grew serious. "Vincent Castellano is coming for dinner tonight. He's bringing his grandson, the future of their family. There are matters we need to discuss." "The succession plan," Lucy nodded, now fully versed in family business. Her role had expanded far beyond translation. With her insight and Antonio's power, they had begun reshaping operations, moving toward legitimate businesses while maintaining the strength that kept rivals at bay. "You'll join us?" Antonio asked, though they both knew it wasn't really a question. Lucy was no longer kept away from important meetings. She was central to them. "Of course," she replied, straightening his tie in a gesture of comfortable intimacy. "Someone needs to make sure you don't restart the war over wine selections." Antonio laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight her. His hands tightened possessively on her waist. "Have I told you today how much I need you?" "Need, not want?" Lucy teased, her arms sliding around his neck. "Both," Antonio admitted, the vulnerability he showed only to her evident in his eyes. "Always both." As his lips claimed hers in a kiss that still made her heart race, Lucy reflected on the strange path that had led her here. From waitress to translator to the woman who stood beside the city's most powerful and dangerous man. A journey that had begun with a simple translation and a fateful meeting of eyes across a bullet-riddled restaurant. Later that evening, as they greeted the Castellanos in the formal dining room, Lucy caught Vincent watching her with shrewd assessment. The old Don had developed a surprising respect for her, especially after learning she had taken down the Russian operative at the cathedral. "You've changed him," Vincent commented quietly while Antonio conversed with the grandson. "I've known Antonio Ricci for 20 years. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Lucy smiled diplomatically. "We've changed each other." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "They say behind every great man is a woman. In our world, she needs to be both beautiful and dangerous." His knowing eyes held a hint of approval. "You are becoming quite dangerous, Lucy." The observation might have disturbed her once. Now she accepted it as the compliment it was intended to be. In this world, Antonio's world, now her world, danger was currency, and she had learned its value. Dinner progressed with the subtle negotiation of power wrapped in social niceties. Lucy watched Antonio command the room, feeling a complex mixture of admiration and love for this man who contained so many contradictions, ruthless yet tender, dangerous yet protective. When Antonio proposed the formal alliance between families, sealed through shared business interests rather than the traditional marriage pact, Lucy felt a surge of pride. This was their vision taking shape, a modernization of old ways without sacrificing strength. "To the future," Antonio toasted, his eyes finding Lucy's across the table. In that gaze was a promise only she could read, that whatever came next, They would face it together. Later that night, with the alliance secured and the Castellanos departed, Antonio led Lucy to the study that had once been forbidden territory. Now it was where they worked together, planning the Empire's transformation. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small wooden box from his safe. "The final piece." Lucy opened it to find a delicate golden key on a fine chain. "What does it open?" she asked, though she suspected the answer. Antonio's smile held secrets and promises in equal measure. "Everything," he replied. "The ledgers, the accounts, the properties. My world, Lucy, all of it." As he fastened the chain around her neck, the key resting against her heart, Lucy understood the magnitude of this gift. In Antonio's world, power was never shared lightly, trust never given completely, except to her. "Are you sure?" she whispered, fingers touching the key. Antonio's hands framed her face with reverent tenderness. "The only thing I've ever been completely sure of," he murmured, "is you." As his lips met hers, sealing this final transformation from translator to equal partner in both life and empire, Lucy knew that whatever the future held, danger, power, enemies, they would face it together. The shy waitress was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had chosen this dangerous life with open eyes, who had found in the most unlikely place a love worth killing for, worth dying for, worth living for.